Hey everyone, today we're working on LeetCode Challenge 2396, and it's called Strictly Palindromic Number. So in this challenge, it tells us that a strictly palindromic number is a number that for every base between 2 and n minus 2 inclusive, the string representation of the integer is a palindrome. So if we are given an integer, we need to return true if it's strictly palindromic and false otherwise. And a string is a palindrome if it's read the same forwards and backwards. So the input example here, if it's 9, we would output false, and it breaks down that in base 2, 9 is 1001, which is a palindrome, but in base 3, 9 is 100, which is not a palindrome. So that's why we would return false, and we would want to check that for any input number that we're given here in the function. And the only constraint we have here is that the number is going to be between 4 and this very large 10 to the 5th power right here. So getting into the code, what I'm going to start with, because we do need to check multiple bases for every number that we're given, I'm going to create a helper function. So I'm going to create a helper function called isPalindrome, and the job of this function is just going to be to check if the number is a palindrome, the string representation of that number in each base. So we're taking in n right here, which is going to be a string, and we need to return if n is equal to n dot split dot reverse dot join, and that's simply checking if this string is equal to the reverse of that string and returning true or false if that string is a palindrome. So we'll use that helper function in the main function here to determine if the number is in fact a palindrome at each of its bases. So right here it gives us the range of what we need to check, how many bases we need to look for this function. So I'm going to set up a for loop using that information. So I'm going to go let I equals 2, and then we're going to go I less than and equal to n minus 2, I plus plus. And then for each number of I here, what we want to do is call n.toString and pass I, and we'll save that in a variable. We'll call this, we'll just call it like a string variable. So what this is doing is this is converting our input number that we were given to a string, and it's changing it to the base, whatever number that I is currently set to. So it will start by, on the first iteration, we'll convert it to base 2. On the second iteration, we'll convert it to base 3, and so on and so forth up to n minus 2. Now that we have that string, we want to run this helper function, isPalindrome, and pass in the string. And we're going to wrap this in parentheses because we need to check this in an if statement. So if is palindrome. So if this returns true, we don't want to do anything here. We want to move on to the next iteration and keep going. So if it returns false, what we want to do is then break out of our for loop and return false, because if at any point at any of these bases along the way we find that one of these strings is not strictly palindromic, then it does not meet the requirements for being strictly palindromic with the definition they've given us over here. Now if we make it all the way through this for loop to n minus 2 and we haven't returned false, then once we get through that, then we can return true. So let's go ahead and run this code. See if that's working with the test cases. Looking good so far. And we submit. And it looks like that solution does work. It is an acceptable solution. Now, this is the kind of the first solution that I worked out following the instructions that they gave and what the objective is of doing this. But as I was looking through some other solutions and the discussions that came with it, one of the weird things people have noticed with this challenge is based on the constraints that they give us here. It seems that one of the only numbers that actually returns true for strictly palindromic is the number 3. And because of the constraints starting at 4, it appears that basically any number within this range does not actually meet the requirements for being strictly palindromic. So the sort of cheater way of solving this problem is actually to just return false, and it appears that that seems to work for this challenge. Now, I don't imagine that whoever wrote this challenge, that's what they were going for, but it seems to be kind of a strange thing with this challenge that you can actually solve it by just returning false. But if anybody finds a reason why this doesn't work or knows why this would be set up this way, feel free to comment and let me know, because I'm not really sure why LeetCode would have a challenge where you can just return false and it would pass all the tests. But if you're trying to be a little bit more strict and actually solve the challenge correctly, this is the route that I would go. So I hope that all makes sense, and hope this video was helpful for you.